A Necessary Evil, Chapter 2. $1.73. "Oh, goody. You're still here," Jillie answered sarcastically. Ned the demon was standing at her kitchen counter, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Oh, I thought I must have dreamed you up," she yawned. "You're out of milk," he answered simply, as he poured a huge helping of sugar into his cup from a glass dispenser. He began stirring his coffee with one long finger. "No, I'm not," she explained. "Lactose intolerant. There's oat milk in the fridge if you want that, and I didn't even think demons drank coffee." "Exactly how many demons have you met?" He opened the fridge, cringed at the oat milk, and closed the door again. Ned sipped his heavily sweetened black coffee somewhat discontentedly. "Never mind," Jillie huffed. "I have to get ready for work, so—" "Here." Ned handed her a cup that seemed to magically appear in his hand. "I made you some. It's got oat milk and no sugar, like you like it." Thanks?" Jillie accepted the cup cautiously. "But if you can magically manifest things, why can't you produce milk for your own cup of coffee?" "Because that would be self-serving," Ned answered. "I am here to serve you, not me." A plop of water landed in the bucket that she had placed in the living room following last night's storm. "Well, could you serve me by fixing my roof?" No," he scratched the fuzz behind one of his horns. "Can't do that as it's part of the project." "Right. Well, thanks for the coffee, Ned." She took a sip, annoyed. To her surprise, the coffee was perfect. In fact, too perfect. It was as if it had been calibrated just to her liking. She's not even sure she could have made it that way herself. Ned read her thoughts. "Think of it as a little perk. You're gonna need it." "What does that mean?" "Can't tell you." "Never mind, I've got to leave for work soon anyway." "Probably want to leave early," Ned suggested. "Why? What did you do?" Jillie glowered at him. Ned eyed the door leading to the garage. "Oh, you didn't!" She grabbed her slip-on black shoes, which matched her otherwise bland black blazer and short skirt, stumbling as she attempted to walk and put them on at the same time. She pressed the garage door button and it opened without incident. "Thank God," she muttered to herself, holding her breath as she slid into the driver's seat and cautiously started her little compact car. The car sputtered to life. She inhaled and let out a sigh. But just as she began to put the car in reverse, it shook from side to side as if taking its last breath, and died. "What the? This is a brand new car, Ned!" she yelled from the garage, even though it wasn't likely he could hear her from the kitchen. Then she saw it. The gas gauge was on empty. "Impossible," she thought to herself. "I fill up whenever I get under half a tank. That flibberty-gibbet!" Jillie slammed the car door shut, tucking the keys into her skirt pocket and bounding through the door leading back to the kitchen. "What am I supposed to do now?" she yelled at Ned, who at this point had pilfered a croissant that she was saving for later from the fridge and was busy adding a mountain of margarine to it with a knife. "There's always the bus," Ned offered. "The bus?" Jillie was appalled. "I haven't taken the bus since high school," she complained. "What's wrong with the bus?" Ned asked. "Sure, it might take you a little longer to get to the office, but you can relax, catch up on your meditation." "But people will think—" "What will people think?" Ned challenged. "That you can't afford a car?" "Oh, maybe," Jillie whined. "Snob," Ned answered, taking a bite of the croissant. "You have exactly 6 minutes to get to the stop, so I suggest you scoot." "I hate you, Ned." Jillie stomped out the front door, slamming it behind her angrily. Her cat Rufus sauntered out from the bedroom, stopping by Ned's feet and flopping behind his heels, purring. "No, you don't," Ned replied simply, looking down at Rufus and nodding. "Hang on!" she yelled, racing to the door. Jillie made it to the bus stop seconds before the driver closed the doors and pulled away. The heavyset woman looked bored, gazing through the windshield as if dreaming of another life. "How much?" Jillie asked. The driver, surprised by the question, answered,
$1.73.
Jillie sifted through her purse. Can you break a 50? Do I look like Rockefeller? The driver answered. $1.73, exact change only. That seems like a strange policy for such an odd amount, Jillie reasoned. I mean, I could see if it were $2. Just then she heard a snickering from the back of the bus. Ned. Do you accept credit cards? What do you think? The driver answered flatly, peering over her sunglasses. By then, a few mutters could be heard from the other passengers, some shifting in their seats impatiently. After all, they had places to be. I have money I can lend you. A timid voice could be heard from the third row of the bus. Jillie looked to see a rather thin man with square wire glasses blinking timidly at her. He stood, folding back his magazine that he was reading so he wouldn't lose the page, and setting it on his seat. He was about average height, no more than a few inches taller than Jillie, roughly the same age. The man reached into his pocket, dragged out the change, and counted it, quietly handing it to the driver, who almost dropped the change on the floor. Just sit down, she ordered, frustrated. They were now very off schedule, and she prided herself on being on schedule. The man returned to his seat and resumed reading his magazine. Thanks, Jillie told him softly, taking the only other unoccupied seat remaining on the bus, just across the aisle from where the man sat. Sure, he answered, never lifting his eyes from the magazine. After a long pause, he added, You can pay me back. Oh, okay, Jillie answered. So much for chivalry, she thought. I don't suppose you have change for $50. Sorry, no. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a business card. But you can send an electronic payment. He handed her the card. My email's just below the number. Jillie accepted the card. It read, Miles Endicott, environmental researcher. See, Jillie thought to herself. Some people have nice normal business cards with normal-sounding names. Environmental researcher, Jillie commented. Well, that sounds interesting. Miles blushed a little before returning once again to his magazine. He wasn't fond of making eye contact, particularly not with a woman who he found not wholly unattractive. Jillie sat back and crossed her legs. She began nervously kicking the back of the seat in front of her with her toe absent-mindedly, until the person in front looking over at Jillie threw her a death glare. Jillie stopped kicking. She glanced back at Miles, whose face was so buried in his magazine, the magazine seemed to swallow him up whole. What are you reading? Jillie leaned across the aisle and asked. Miles, whose pale complexion had a hint of rose in it now, looked up and answered, It's an article about cognitive dysfunctions. Well, Jillie smiled brightly, that seems interesting. Not really, he mumbled, turning his gaze back towards his magazine. Jillie gave up. Instead, sitting back and waiting impatiently for the bus to reach the stop she assumed was closest to work, and got off. As the bus pulled away, there was Ned smiling out the back window and waving. Jerk, she thought. Jillie eyed her watch and realized she was already 35 minutes late. Great, she muttered to herself as she picked up the pace. She reached the office building where she worked, only to witness a flood of police cars, one sheriff's vehicle, and a swarm of officers, reporters, and her coworkers, all gathered outside the parking lot. Jillian! A curly, blonde-haired woman wearing an all-pink business suit came bounding toward her. Maxine, Jillie addressed her friend and coworker, surprised. What the heck is going on? Jillie eyed her boss, Joshua Dunkel, as two officers flanked him on each side, escorting him to one of the police cars. Of all the days you picked to be late, Maxine stopped to catch her breath, putting her hands on her hips and heaving a little in and out to suck in air. Mr. Dunkel, all of the C-suite execs really, have been arrested in conjunction with some money laundering scheme. After a long pause, she added, including Darren. What? Jillie shook her head in disbelief. That's not possible. But somewhere in the back of her mind, Jillie remembered an odd conversation she had with her now ex-boyfriend Darren about some business opportunity his brother, their boss, Joshua, had presented to him. "It's a chance of a lifetime, babe," Darren told her one evening after work. They'd only been living together for about 4 months. Darren, who did a fair job of pretending to work, was kept on as a department manager, most likely out of nepotism. Jillie had spent a fair bit of time working late, covering up for his mistakes. Now he was asking her for money. A lot of it. "I'm sorry, honey. You know I want to be supportive, but it took me a really long time to save up $21,000. I don't feel comfortable with this." "You never trusted me," Darren sulked. And that's when the unraveling began. Darren became progressively moodier, and one day left taking half of everything. Half the furniture, half the electronics, even half the dinnerware, which made no sense since they were hers to start with, and they were part of a set. "Earth to Jillie," Maxine waved a hand in front of her friend's face. "It gets worse." "Worse how?" Jillie asked cautiously. Jillie glanced up to see Ned leaning against an oak tree on the center aisle, picking his teeth with a nail on his pinky finger. She looked back at Maxine. "The office is shut down until further notice." "Just great," Jillie threw her hands in the air. "Including the payroll department," Maxine finished. "So we're both out of work and we're not getting paid for the last 2 weeks." "I'm afraid so." Maxine's face dropped before it suddenly lit up again. "But look on the bright side," she smiled. Maxine was a boatload of optimism, which Jillie found annoying sometimes. Today was one of those times. "And what would that be?" Jillie answered flatly. "At least it's not like any of us were involved, and it looks like they won't ask for us to return our paychecks, seeing as how we thought we were legit writers for a legit magazine." "Wait, what?" "Oh, the magazine is really a magazine, but it was just a cover for something else, whatever they had going on." Suddenly, only one thing was going through Jillie's mind. $21,000. Maxine, seeing as we're not getting back to work anytime soon, any chance you can give me a lift back to my house?" "Sure," Maxine agreed pleasantly. "But what happened to your car?" "Don't ask," Jillie answered grimly. Jillie returned home to find that the leak had gotten worse. Time to face the inevitable. She had to call her brother. "Hello," he answered on the first ring. "Is that Jillian?" a voice called from the other end of the phone. Jillian's sister-in-law, Shauna. "Yup." Her brother was almost as enthusiastic as Maxine, except with 2 major flaws. 1, he was oblivious to just about everything, and 2, he was married to the most self-absorbed woman Jillie had ever met, the kind of woman who drama seemed to follow wherever she went. Not that Jillie could point fingers at the moment, given her present situation. "Listen, Kevin," Jillie began. "I hate to bother you, but—" "It's about the roof, isn't it?" Kevin asked. "Yes, but how did you—" "Shauna drove by your house today just to see how you were getting on after the storm. She noticed some of the shingles. I can come look at it tomorrow." A phone call would have sufficed, Jillie thought. But Shauna made regular rounds through everybody's neighborhood, it seemed. She liked being on the pulse of the latest gossip. "Okay, thanks." "Don't mention it." Kevin's voice boomed through the receiver. "I won't even charge you full price. I'm kidding." He laughed at his own joke. Kevin made more money than God, and if he did any work for you for free, you got to hear about it forever. "Thanks, Kevin," she answered before the two said their goodbyes. Jillie instinctively reached into her jacket to remove her car keys, more out of habit than anything else. Obviously, they weren't there. What was there, however, was a business card. Miles Endicott's business card. "Let it never be said that I don't honor my debts," Jillie said aloud. The phone rang so many times when she called, she expected that it would go to voicemail. When finally, "Hello?" a timid voice answered. Hi, this is the girl from the bus, the one who owes you $1.73.
Oh, right,
Miles acknowledged.
I thought you were the guy I was trying to get in touch with about renting a room.
No, Jillie looked at the ceiling, where another large water stain was appearing. Suddenly, an image flashed through her mind of Darren having taken over the spare bedroom and filling it with cheap guitars, old car parts, and assorted computer monitors and cables he thought he might need one day. The room had been such a mess that the day after he left, she called to have the carpet replaced, painted the walls, and converted it into a spare bedroom, just to rid the place of his energy. You need a room? Jillie finally asked.
Well, yeah,
Miles replied.
I'm new in town and found some guy Ned online who said he can rent me a room till I got settled. I'm starting a new job in a few days, only now I booked a room at a motel for a night 'cause he suddenly ghosted me, and I've got nowhere to go.
Jillie sucked in her breath. Ned. Well, I tell you what, Miles, it just so happens that I have a room for rent at my house. It's off of Orchard Lane near the bus stop. You can stay here till you get settled. Jillie couldn't believe what was coming out of her mouth, as she wasn't inclined to invite strangers into her home. What was Ned going to charge you?
$600 a month, including utilities. But are you sure about this?
Of course. I need a tenant, and you need a place to stay. Why not?
'Cause you're a...
Girl, Jillie finished.
Well, yeah.
Your room is on the other end of the house, and you'd have your own bathroom. We just have to share a kitchen and living room. I promise you it'll be fine. Why don't you stop by tomorrow and see the place? Another droplet fell from the ceiling. But I would need the rent money up front, she confirmed.
Well, maybe Ned'll...
Ned is not going to call you, she reassured him.
Right.
Miles answered.
So, $598.27?
What? Jillie was confused, then she realized it. Miles was paying rent, less $1.73. Today's writing prompt is about taking a real-world aggravation and exaggerating it through fiction in a way to use humor to lighten the stress. So, for example, with Jillie's work situation, perhaps you had a work situation. Maybe a boss yelled at you, and in your fictional story, your boss turns into this fire-breathing dragon and sets fire to all of the cubicles around you except yours, so everyone else gets to go home, but you still have to work. This is just one example. And if you prefer to draw or collage versus write, feel free. It's just an exercise in finding the humor in situations. Thanks for joining me.